Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good late afternoon or good evening to viewers in Malaysia. Good evening to viewers in Australia, also viewers in Japan. And Alhamdulillah, thank you very much for joining our webinar organized by the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies. As we know, recently there was a ceasefire about 2 weeks ago, I think, which meant that the killing and genocide in Gaza has stopped mercifully, and then which was quite surprising for many people because everybody thought that Israel was not going to call a ceasefire, despite the call around the world calling for the ceasefire. They ignored the United Nations, all kind of call by the international community, and completely ignored by Israel with the backing of the United States and also by the European supporters of Israel. But suddenly, out of the blue, sort of, they agreed to the terms of ceasefire offered by Hamas in May, which was very surprising. And and of course, we know the story that some people say that the main factor was Donald Trump, and some people say there was nothing to do with Donald Trump or something else. It was a situation which Israel could not continue because of the opposition internally in Israel to the genocide itself. So we are not sure. Anyway, it seems to be holding. The hostages have been released, and also prisoners. Also, you can call them hostages too. Prisoners of conscience, Palestinian prisoners of conscience, Israeli jails have been released too. So, in other words, the terms of this ceasefire are being observed by both parties. And this is surprising because they are arch enemies. They want to kill each other, but they agreed to talk to each other and agreed. Of course, there are 3 phases. This is the first phase. We have the second phase, and the last phase, which is where there's supposed to be complete withdrawal of Israel from Gaza, and also no military build up by Hamas. Also, the end of blockade of Gaza, which is actually also those are conditions which are very, very difficult to believe that will be fulfilled by both parties. And then we have other developments. Trump talking about forcing sort of Palestinians to leave Gaza to go to Egypt and Jordan, and then Jordan and Egypt saying no way they will agree to suggestion by Trump. So things are really developing very fast. So we are trying to make sense of what's happening, and some of us are still confused, and that is why we are organizing this seminar, hoping to get some enlightenment from our panelists, which we have invited again to our webinar. Most of you are very familiar with our panelists, but I will introduce them to you anyway. We have Peter Slezak, Honorary Associate Professor Peter Slezak from University of New South Wales in Sydney, and also Professor Sol Takahashi from Osaka Gakuen University in Osaka, Japan. Welcome both of you to our webinar. Thank you again for your kind willingness to discuss with us all these important and interesting topics. Before I pose the questions to you, let me just briefly introduce both of you to our viewers. Peter is actually also the co-founder of Independent Australian Jewish Voice or Jewish Voices, and also an executive member of the Australia Palestine Advocacy Network, and also a member of the Committee of Advisors Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies at the University of Malaya. Peter is basically a philosopher of science, and also he delves also in the area of philosophy of languages and cognitive science. and has published widely on science education and sociology of science. But Peter is, in the context of our discussion today, is an activist for cause of justice in Palestine. Professor Sol Takahashi he teaches human rights law at Osaka Gakuen University, and most importantly, he was the deputy head of office in occupied Palestine for the office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And he has written many articles on the issue of Palestine, and also gives a lot of speeches in international platforms on the issue of Palestine. So he's very well versed about the situation in Palestine in the past and also presently. So without further ado, I'm going to ask this question to both of you, and hopefully you can give your comments and what you think about how, number one, the first question is, after so many years of America, Israel, the European community classifying or branding Hamas as a terrorist organization, they have spent probably hundreds of billions to eliminate it. Since 1987, since it was formed, I remember when I was a student in the US, at that time, Bill Clinton was the president. He said, Hamas, we must make sure that it doesn't exist anymore. We are going to eliminate it. Bill Clinton now is an old man. We can some of the pictures of him walking around as if he's lost. But Hamas is getting stronger. And after more than 1.5 years of being pummeled, being brutalized, being bombed by Israel with the help of America, they came out and we saw the images of them releasing the hostages, looking very, very strong, very healthy, right? Their uniforms look as if they just came out from the laundry, from the laundrette. And then they had guns. Some of the guns were the ones used by Israeli commandos. So what is happening? Is Hamas getting stronger? And if it's getting stronger, what is going to happen in the future? What does that tell us about the future of Palestine and the future of Hamas? Peter, you want to go first?
Well, I was going to say Sol should speak first, but I might as well jump in. Sol is the expert. I'm an amateur. But look, the first thing that I want to say, and I imagine Sol will concur, it's important to say that Hamas is always described and is officially proscribed as a terrorist organization. But that's nonsense. I mean, in the sense that, firstly, it's democratically elected and in a free and fair election in 2006, I think it was, supervised, I think, at the time by the late Jimmy Carter. That's the first thing to say. It's apart from being a fundamentalist Islamic organization, it probably would be re-elected if there was an election, and probably elected, and Sol may confirm, in the West Bank as well. It's popular for good reason. That's the first thing to say. And the idea that it's a terrorist organization is just propaganda. I mean, Israel is a much worse terrorist organization. The United States government is a much worse terrorist organization. This is propaganda. And it's a way of in some cases, of course, in Australia and perhaps in America, it's a way of preventing legally any waving flags. For example, in the rallies in Sydney, it became an issue that it's actually a crime to wave a Hamas flag. It's not a crime to wave the Israeli flag, which is much worse. So that's an important thing that I think is worth saying. I don't, perhaps none of us have too much insight into whether it's getting stronger. I mean, I think that's probably an exaggeration, but certainly it's surviving. And we can see, as you mentioned, the numbers and despite all the assassinations. And I think, again, I will rely on Sol's insight, but it's not just a party or an organization. It's a mass resistance movement. And I think they keep recruiting new people for the obvious reasons that any oppressed organization or people will come and volunteer to participate. So that's the main thing that occurs to me to say.
Okay, so certainly it's getting more popular among Palestinians, apparently. Like, obviously getting more popular because of what happened over the last 1.5 years, right? Sol? Okay, Sol, Go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks, Peter. And you're not an amateur by any means, for sure. But I concur with pretty much everything you say. If there were an election today in the West Bank, probably Hamas would win. There have been some Palestinian opinion surveys indicating that. There have been opinion surveys also in Gaza, but of course it's kind of difficult to hold anything in Gaza. It has been over the last 15, 16 months, of course. But in the West Bank, certainly the popularity of Hamas has increased very, very dramatically, and one would only expect it to be. The propagandists will, jump on that and jump on the fact that, like you rightly say, Hamas won the elections in 2006, fair and square. Propagandists, Western propagandists will jump on that to try to say, well, that just goes to show that, Palestinians are bloodthirsty, human animals, and they're happy with beheaded babies and mass rapes, all these, complete fabrications that, were quickly debunked. But look, the point is, Hamas is a national independence movement. Besides being a political party, and besides in Gaza at least being a governing structure and a governing organization, it is a national independence movement, and it's basically impossible to destroy a national independence movement. It's impossible to do. People talk about. I've seen a lot of people say that, look, you can't kill Hamas because it's an organization, but it's also an idea. And you can't kill an idea. And I guess that's a sort of poetic way of putting it. But look, for every Hamas fighter who's imprisoned and tortured or killed, all of his sons are going to, of course, join the recruitment and sign up to avenge him. I mean, this is just human nature. So this is how it goes, and you can't destroy a national independence movement like that. And the Brits have found that out. The French have found that out. The Americans, at least before Donald Trump, found that out. In Latin America, and the Philippines, and and it's just how it goes. And the Israelis will find that out for sure. The Israelis are going to see that, like Nazari, like you say. I'm not sure that they've been getting stronger over the past 15, 16 months. But like you say, I mean, those videos, they came out, it looked like all, their uniforms were brand new. All of them had these, they had shiny weapons, and all of them looked very healthy and very fit and very, very high in spirits for sure. Mm-hmm. And if I were them, I would be too. So, the idea that you can destroy Hamas is it's ridiculous. It's not going to happen.
Okay. Well, the fact that Israel decided to negotiate with Hamas, agree to the terms, you are agreeing to the terms, so by an organization whom you denote as a terrorist organization. That's also already consistency there, right? You are actually, go ahead.
Could I jump in and say something else? Firstly, on the negotiations and the agreement on the ceasefire, my understanding is that the agreement was already on the table months before. My understanding is that there was nothing new in the current or the agreement that they made that wasn't already available to Israel. And so that in itself is a scandal, that they could have ended this and had a ceasefire long before the savings of many lives. That tells you something about Israel and its cruelty. That's an important fact about the way Israel has been conducting this.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. So now we have a ceasefire. The first one is supposed to be completed after 42 days, and then there are gonna be a second phase, and then a third phase, and then as I was asking in the beginning just now, what is the main factor that contributed to the ceasefire? Is it really because of Trump? I don't want to think that Trump is so powerful and so influential such that he could change everything by just sending his representative to negotiate. And that's it. Israel is so scared of him that they agreed. Is it that sounds so simple, or is it because Israel is actually finding it impossible to continue with the war anyway? That was what I read in some reports. because so many people in Israel, so many Israelis are against this war, and then the soldiers are defecting and also are not going back to refuse to go and fight again. What is the real factor that caused this ceasefire? What do you think? And is it going to hold or not?
Whom are you asking?
Saul, you want to go first? Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I mean, the question of how the Israelis agreed to the ceasefire is, I mean, honestly, we don't really know to what extent that sort of fateful trip of Trump's envoy to the region. We don't really know, about these stories. I mean, we just don't know. I mean, we hear that he was going to arrive in was it Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and Netanyahu said, "Oh well, I can't meet you because it's Saturday and it's our day of rest." And the envoy just said, "Look, you're going to get off your butt and you're going to meet me, or you're going to regret it." And he made him swallow the ceasefire. I actually do kind of think that's plausible. I don't think it's implausible, because Trump had been saying, for quite a long time that he wanted to see the shooting end by the time he assumed office. So I actually do think that's kind of plausible. And I think, which is not to say that, Trump is a peace-loving lover of the Palestinians, which, as we see, was clearly not the case. But, he did want the shooting over by the time he came in. Now, I do think, Trump and Biden and every single American president could have stopped, could stop Israeli apartheid and oppression and military offensives. They could stop it within 24 hours if they wanted to. We've said that with Genocide, Joe, and I think the same holds for Trump. If Trump, closes the spigot of weapons and political support, then the Israelis simply cannot continue any kind of serious military offensive, at least not over for more than a couple of days. And Israeli military leaders have said the same. So I do think if these American bigwigs snap their fingers, then the Israelis do have to jump to attention. I know, the issue of Israel sort of imploding and the demonstrations and all that. I don't know. I mean, I economically, certainly Israel is doing very poorly. Clearly, there have been a large number of Jewish Israelis who seem to have abandoned the country, at least in the immediate term. We don't know if they'll, maybe, I don't think they abandoned their passports. So presumably they could come back if they wanted to, if they felt that it was a good idea. Yeah. But it seems like a very large number of Israelis have gone abroad. A lot of these numbers are actually, classified state secrets in Israel. So we don't really know, and the other thing is this is very difficult to count. But, the point is, it seems like a lot of them have left. Economically, it's going very, very badly. So, for sure, that's part of it. I'm very hesitant about putting too much weight on these demonstrations, though. Right. Because the vast majority of the Jewish Israelis that are demonstrating, they're demonstrating against Netanyahu, whom a lot of them do hate, and feel is corrupt and terrible and an awful leader, and he should be thrown in jail. But they're not against the genocide as such. No. They feel that there should be a ceasefire to get their people back home. And then after that, they can just go shooting and oppressing and killing as many people as they want. I don't see any Jewish Israelis protesting Trump's idea that the Gazans should just be cleared out of, that Gaza should be cleaned out of all the Palestinians. I don't see anybody demonstrating against that. This is not only, this is the Zionist dream. This is what the Zionists have been gunning for since, time immemorial, since the beginning of their movement. And, that's what I feel is the danger in emphasizing Netanyahu and this business about him being, the most extreme right-wing government in the history of Israel, blah, blah, blah. And yes, of course, they are fascists and fanatics, and, we can all see that. And clearly they are a negative force. And, for sure, Netanyahu should be in an orange jumpsuit, if not in the state of Israel, but in The Hague. But, every single Israeli political leader basically agrees with him on a fundamental level about ethnically cleansing Gaza and the rest and the West Bank, and frankly all of Palestine. All of this is what they've been gunning for. This is what they all want. And so, this is, I don't think that's really such a big factor here, or at least not as big a factor as some of us would like it to be.
I just jump in and add to that. I think I was going to say exactly the same thing, Saul. And I just repeat or emphasize, for example, the journalist Gideon Levy will cite the statistics of the polls in Israel.
Yeah.
He talks about well over 90% of the Israelis agree with the ongoing genocide as it was before they had the ceasefire. And a large majority of those wanted to go even further.
Yeah.
So it's not just Netanyahu and his crazy fascist allies in the government. The whole population is this genocidal, fascist country. That's very disturbing. And I might add that the diaspora Jews are an important part of this. Australia here is different from America, perhaps. Here, I'm sad to say, the vast majority of the Jewish community support Israel uncritically. They're completely wallowing in what happened on October 7. They're not paying attention to the genocide in Gaza. And if they are, they don't care. It's very shocking to say that. They really don't. In America, I imagine, I don't have too much data on it, but the American Jews are different. They're generally progressive. They're Democrat voters. Here, they'd all be Republicans in Australia. They're all equivalent conservative. I imagine the dissent among the Jews in America for some time has been growing. Some years ago, Norman Finkelstein wrote a book called They Know Too Much, because they're progressive generally on everything except Israel. And that may be a factor in the shift that would be significant if it could grow. And there's a very large dissenting anti-Zionist movement in America. So however crazy Israel is, it has to deal with the rest of the world.
Okay, what about the fact, maybe the reason why, I'm just hypothesizing here, hypothesis, sort of, what could it be because they can't afford to go to continue with the genocide, because according to some report that say that maybe more than around 6,000 soldiers actually have been killed, but these have not been revealed by the Israeli government to the Israeli public. Many have been killed, maybe tens of thousands have been injured, maybe more than that. So they can't continue with the war in Gaza. But what happened is that Netanyahu used the pressure by Trump as an excuse to stop it, as if it's not my choice, more of Trump. And at the same time, they cannot afford to go to war in Gaza, but they want to get something in the West Bank. So that is why they are talking about annexation. They want to really focus on taking lands from, expelling people from the West Bank. In other words, sacrificing Gaza in order to get more in the West Bank with American support. So, in other words, they are forced by the resistance in Gaza, but the excuse and the support by Trump to confiscate more lands, build more settlements in the West Bank, and which is happening now. That may be also a factor. Any comment on that?
Well, I mean, it just may be. For sure, they're gunning for the West Bank right now. I mean, what we're looking at right now is the Gazification of the West Bank. From the Israeli perspective, I mean, what they're doing in Jenin and all the northern cities is it's outrageous. It's terrible. And for sure, the idea is that they are going to expand that. And we mustn't forget that in this fateful press conference that Trump and Netanyahu did jointly just the other night, Trump announced that they were looking at, quote unquote, preparing a position on the annexation of the West Bank, and that within 4 weeks or so that they were looking at publishing that. So, they're basically Trump is moving towards recognizing annexation of the West Bank, it seems. And that's for sure, that's all part of it. For the Israelis, Gaza is less important than the West Bank. sort of historically, religiously, for these sort of nationalist religious fanatics, the West Bank is really where it's at. So that's part of it. I don't know if it was kind of a thought through conspiracy from the beginning, but of course it's certainly possible that Trump and his ilk had told Netanyahu, look, stop the shooting now, but we'll give you whatever, we'll give you everything, after I take office. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible.
It's possible.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, what is, maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves here. If that's the case, I'm sorry. But, when you look at that press conference, and I watched this press conference live and I got physically sick, but when you look at it, of course, what Trump announced was disgusting and deranged and the whole bit. But it's also ironic. We have to note, ironically, that his statements, completely lying or not, I mean, his statements contained 100 times more empathy for Palestinians than Biden and his cronies had ever shown. For Biden, the Palestinians simply didn't exist, or they were liars, or first of all, they're rapists, they were baby beheaders, and then they were liars because you couldn't even trust the statistics of the dead that the health ministry had issued, despite the fact that the U.S. State Department itself used them. I'm not trying to sort of promote Trump and what he's anything about Trump at all. But it's just I think what I'm trying to do is just to point out the low level and the terrible situation that we're in with regards to the political elite in the United States and how much they are giving the Zionists in Israel and just how much they're giving Netanyahu and all of Israel, that is, say, all the political elite in Israel, what they want.
Okay. I was just thinking just now, if they honor the ceasefire terms in Gaza, but the Israelis continue to grab more lands, do more ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, how should the Palestinians respond? The one in the West Bank, they are fighting, of course, because they want to resist. They are rightly so. They cannot allow the Israelis to come and grab more land. They have to resist. Those are the Palestinians in the West Bank. But those in Gaza who are now not being attacked, they are allowed to rebuild their country. They are allowed to build homes and then get food, medication, etc. So they are recovering. And how should the Palestinians in Gaza respond to the annihilation and cruelty and brutalities happening in West Bank? I think it's a very challenging issue for Palestinian leadership, even for Hamas. What do you think? Peter, any comment?
Well, look, I think the people in Gaza have got enough to worry about. I don't think they're worrying, not the highest priority to worry about the West Bank. They're in such a dire situation. I mean, I'm sure they have a view, but that's not going to be their main concern. Maybe your question really is what the people in the West Bank should do. The first thing I want to say is our politicians, for example, have been running this gaslighting, I suppose you'd say, about we want a two-state solution. The two-state solution disappeared a long time ago. It's a kind of a fiction. And what's very important to say in this regard is that the Likud charter, the government's, the governing party's charter, has long ago always had that there will be no Palestinian state from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean. Netanyahu has publicly, constantly repeated that there is no intention to have a Palestinian state. So this whole idea of the international consensus on a two-state solution is kind of empty rhetoric, because if nobody does anything about that, they're continuing to make settlements. There's now, 700,000, maybe closer to 1 million settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Plausibly, the possibility of a Palestinian state has disappeared. So that's a real crisis, and that's why there's a push for a once democratic state by significant figures in the Palestinian and on the Israeli side. That's important to talk about because we have to face the realities. of what's happening on the ground in the West Bank. And now I think you may have said, but it's now been explicitly discussed that they will just formally annex the whole West Bank. I mean, where is the world? How is the world allowed to get to this point where it's been officially, a two-state, solution? But Oslo was always a fraud. It was always rigged, and so we're seeing the playing out of what was always a confidence trick against the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I just want to ask your thoughts about the future. What you are talking about now is the future in West Bank is probably they're going to create more they are going to carry out more ethnic cleansing. So we cannot stay still. We are going to witness brutalities and injustice on mammoth scale in the coming years, months and years. So the struggle for freedom and justice for Palestine must continue, must be even increased. But the scenario in Gaza apparently is complete opposite. Is it really true that they are going to end the blockade of Gaza? Is it true that they are going to completely withdraw? Because Hamas said, no, we want you to completely withdraw and then end the blockade of Gaza. So that is the end of the third phase. Is that going to happen? If we study back the objectives of Zionism, they don't want any Palestinian, neither in the West Bank nor in Gaza. And so, is this a trick? Are the Palestinians being hoodwinked into thinking that they're going to offer the end of blockade of Gaza?
Well, if I may, look, every single ceasefire between Israel and Hamas had this provision that the blockade would end.
Yeah.
And Israel has never implemented it. Every single ceasefire has been broken by Israel. I'm not making that up. I mean, every single ceasefire that Israel has ever entered into, with Hamas, with Hezbollah, whomever. I mean, they've broken every single one. Israel has never fulfilled its obligations under these kind of agreements, and there's absolutely no reason to expect that they will this time either. So when I saw that, as part of the third phase and Israel completely withdrawing, which is maybe possible, but the end of the blockade, this seemed like just like a pipe. Well, I wouldn't call it a pipe dream, but it just seemed too much to hope for, unfortunately. And Hamas, they're not dummies, so I don't think they expected either. But let's see how it happened. And we don't know the extent to which the Egyptians and the Qataris also had played a role in this. But I mean, the situation in Gaza and the West Bank, I think, are not fundamentally different. I mean, what's going on in the West Bank, what the Israelis have been pushing forward in the West Bank now, in particular, is just it's a more strengthened version of what they've been doing for decades in the West Bank, and it's the Gazification of the West Bank. I mean, they have fighter planes bombing refugee camps now, and this had not been seen since the Second Intifada for a few times, but it really has not been seen for a very long time. So that's clearly what they're gunning for. There's no question that their overall that their main goal is to drive all the Palestinians out. And what Trump was saying the other night is it's a wet dream for them. I mean, this is something that they foolishly believe Trump could just snap his fingers and make happen. And I really am very concerned. I'm very worried about what's going to happen. Certainly in the short term, but in the long term, for sure, the Israelis and the Americans and the Europeans behind the Israelis, they will not be victorious, for sure. For sure, the Palestinians are not going anywhere. They're not going to be driven off their land. I mean, look, the Israelis completely decimated all of Gaza. They destroyed all of the infrastructure, besides the countless tens of thousands which they have killed, destroying the healthcare, destroying the water infrastructure, all this kind of thing. And yet still, the Palestinians are refusing to budge. They're refusing to leave their land. And this is it's amazing. I mean, it's really admirable to see their resilience and their strength in resisting this kind of oppression and brutal aggression. So it really is amazing, and I don't see that changing. I think what's going to happen in Gaza now, so in the West Bank we're seeing more overt violence at the hands of Israel. Probably in Gaza, at least already. We're hearing reports that Israel is not letting in the amount of aid that it had promised. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
If anybody ever thought they were really going to do that, I mean, come on. I mean, that was never going to happen. There was a report, I think, this morning in Al Jazeera about only 2% of the pledged amount of tents had got through to the north of Gaza. And this is cold. This is not the Arabian Peninsula. This is not Dubai. I mean, it's very cold, especially in the evenings. And, young children are getting hypothermia and dying. So I think that's probably the strategy, at least in the immediate term of the Israelis, to, once again, prevent any aid from getting in and just starving people and hoping that that's going to encourage them to leave. I mean, that seems to be the strategy. And now with Trump in office, they figure that they can do that. They'll be given a carte blanche to do that.
Okay. All right, Peter, what do you think of Trump's recent statements doubling down on his plan to get all the Gazans out from Gaza to go to Jordan and Egypt? Is he really so ignorant about the issue of Palestine to come up with that plan? Surely he knows that it's not going to be accepted by the Palestinians.
You're right. I mean, he's an idiot. That's the answer. I mean, this is some sort of, thought bubble. He's so unsophisticated. He thinks this is like a realistic prospect. Fortunately, I just actually spoke. We had a rally here in Sydney, a kind of a flash rally, which I spoke at about 10 minutes before we met. And I referred to the fact that all of the Arab leaders and others have come out and repudiated this prospect. Fortunately, I understand Egypt and Jordan and none of the other countries are willing to support something like that. However, I mean, it seems impractical anyway. I don't know how it could possibly happen. So to the credit of the Arab countries, they're not willing to go along with this. So Trump just says anything that comes into his head. That's about the end of it. I don't see this as a realistic plan. He talked about, comparing the Gaza seashore to the French Riviera. I mean, what is he talking about? This is like insane stuff. And of course, he said it's going to be for the people of the world. What's he talking about? He didn't mean the Palestinians. Of course, he means what? Rich, people from America. This is so ludicrous. But what do you expect from Trump? This is normal. He talks, won't be rude, he talks nonsense. I was going to say something obscene.
Okay. All right. But then he has, how do you say it? Trump card over the Egyptians and the Jordanians, because they need American support in order to remain viable, the economy to remain viable, especially Egypt. As we know, U.S. aid has been terminated for all countries except for Israel and Egypt. So Egypt cannot survive without U.S. money coming in terms of military aid and also financial aid. Apparently, subsidies of food can only continue if America continue to subsidize or send money to Egypt. So he has that so-called Trump card. In other words, he can actually force. And if Egypt refuses to listen to him, General Sisi refused to listen to him, he will say no more money for you. And what's going to happen to Egypt? So that means Egypt is going to be weakened and may actually fall into the hands of Islamist groups who are very sympathetic to the Palestinians.
Look, Saul can help me on this, but my impression is that the Egyptian people, as in Jordan, the people are different from the leadership. And whatever the ruling classes in these countries may want to do, they also probably have to confront the attitudes, the views of their public, and the consequences of that. So, I mean, I imagine the support for the Palestinians and the general public is significant in these countries, and I don't think the leadership can just get away with anything that Trump may want. But maybe Saul has a better insight into that. I guess my gut feeling about the situation.
No. I mean, you're definitely right, Peter. The Arab Street, despite what these corrupt dictators in many Arab countries might say, the Arab Street, so to speak, is very, very strongly pro-Palestinian. And, yes, these countries, I mean, Egypt obviously is a military dictatorship, and, there are plenty of rights violations, and, the right to freedom of expression and the right to freedom of protest, these kind of things are very, are severely restricted. But, no dictator can completely ignore the views of his people. So, for Egypt and Jordan, this is definitely an existential issue. I mean, I mean, even supposing it were sort of logistically feasible, it just they cannot allow this kind of thing to happen. They would not be able to allow it. Now, that having been said, I'm maybe I'm just sort of glass half empty kind of guy, but I am very worried about this because, Nazari, like you say, Trump, I don't know if he has a Trump card, but he has a lot of cards, and he has a lot of levers of pressure that he can exert on not only Egypt and Jordan, but some of the other countries as well. It's what's amazing about this and everything that Trump does, and Trump and his cronies. I agree with you for sure, Peter. I mean, Trump he's an idiot. I mean, he's a complete buffoon. I mean, it's almost difficult to take anything he says seriously, and he has no endearing qualities whatsoever. But that's not necessarily the case regarding the people around him. Some of whom are savvy Washington insiders and know, the buttons to press. And it's, I kind of sort of lost my train of thought, but it is, I am concerned about what sort of pressure they're going to try to exert on some other countries to, push this forward. Last thing, that's right, I wanted to say is what is amazing is the overtly racist nature, not only of what they're doing of this idea about Gaza, but just about everything they do. I mean, just the other day, Marco Rubio had somehow strong-armed, no, I can't remember, I think it was the Guatemalans, or maybe it was El Salvador, and they agreed to house not only returned irregular migrants from the United States, but prisoners. So like prisoners in US prisons, some of whom may even be American citizens, that they would be shipped off to, I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, I can't remember which country it was. It might have been El Salvador, it might have been Honduras. And this boggles the mind because obviously Trump is not, Trump and his cronies are not thinking of fobbing off white people of Norwegian stock in the prisons to these Latin American countries. No, it's like, well, yeah, you may be a US citizen, but you're not really American. You're not really one of us. So we're going to send you back to your country. Guatemala, Honduras, it's all the same. I mean, you guys all speak Spanish, right? So, that's the idea here. And, with the Gazans, same kind of attitude. I mean, look, if Gazans needed to be temporarily relocated because of the rebuilding and for a very, very short, clearly defined period of time. Well, where should they go? They should go to their ancestral homes in Israel. Very easy, right? It's right there, right across, right around the corner. From Gaza, a lot of these people, they could literally see the houses that their fathers, their grandfathers, maybe in some of their cases, they themselves had, come from. So we're right there. But of course, that's never an option. Well, maybe they should be relocated to Montana or to Iowa, plenty of land there. But no, of course not. Oh, but no. These brown people, they don't come our country, they go to places where other brown people live, and they all speak the same language, or it's all the same to us. I mean, it's all the same, right? And this is I think one of the defining features of Trump, the people surrounding him, this entire, unfortunately, MAGA movement. From when Trump was in office the first time, you may remember, I think it was the prime minister who came and visited him in the White House, and he was at the press conference. He was all giddy about it, and he was saying, "Oh, why don't we get more migrants from people? Why don't we get more people, like people from Norway? You remember this?" And he didn't say it explicitly, but it was clear what he was saying. Why don't we get clean white people? Why are we not people from shithole countries? So this whole attitude underpins anything and everything they do. So it really is it's amazing. I mean, we are really seeing the end.
But then, as the Arab leaders, Egypt and Jordan,
yes,
they are now between the rock and a hard place now. If they acquiesce, they agree with Trump, it's not acceptable to their public. They may be in trouble with their Arab street. But at the same time, they refuse Trump's wish, then they may be in trouble with Trump. We do not know what's going to happen between America and Egypt and Jordan in terms of financial aid. So I think they are probably not going to have they are going to have sleepless nights. I think the leaders of these two countries in the coming weeks. Anyway, then we don't have much sympathy with them anyway. So let them have their sleepless nights. Let's go to the next issue I want to discuss with both of you, which is America's attitude toward the ICC. I read that some congressmen, they are really serious. They want to sanction the ICC prosecutor, the ICC itself, and the families. In other words, you can be arrested for being part of the ICC. The ICC was created by the international community, of course, dominated by the West. European countries are talking about them all the time, meaning this is law and order, international law and order is actually symbolized by the ICC. So with America treating ICC in that way, what's going to happen in the future? Is it really realistic? Is it what is going to happen in terms of relationship between America and Europe if the Congress proceed with this sanctioning of the ICC? Peter?
Well, again, I defer to Saul, but America, I understand, and Israel are not members of the ICC. So the idea that they would, respond, it's like, mafia, gangster tactics. They're going to take out, these guys. It's just, again, it's sort of insanity. Rogue states behaving lawlessly, which is hardly new, of course, for America, but it's so blatant that that an international legal body should be threatened. But it's because, look, you only have to listen to the rhetoric coming out of Israel. They regard the ICC and the warrants for their arrest as some kind of joke. And I have to tell you, the Jewish organizations here simply echo that. It's actually shocking, the lack of any real respect for the international order and the idea. And of course, that's the risk. All of this stuff is just throwing a spanner into the international legal system, such as it was, with all its flaws that Saul can tell us about. So this is shocking, and the question is, my question always is, how do our politicians respond to this? Quite apart from the absurdity, there's this curious tolerance and pandering among our politicians. Our leadership here doesn't say boo. They don't say anything about anything. I was at the rally today. I always say something very critical of our Prime Minister. It doesn't pipe up, even in this latest business where Trump comes out with stuff. Our Prime Minister at a press conference refused to say anything. I mean, this is insane. So the world, they can act with impunity. America and its attempts to sanction these organizations, and Europe isn't too good on this. European, Germany and the others, they're not too good in supporting the rights of the Palestinians.
Okay, so What's your
Yeah,
comment on that?
yeah, no, I mean, Peter, you're absolutely right. And I wish I could say, I mean, hearing your stories about Australia, it is really, they are really shocking.
Shocking.
But, you know, I wish I could say that the Europeans are going to stand up for the ICC, and they're going to, all of a sudden, they're going to have a spine, and they're going to say,
Yeah.
you know, Trump, this is absolutely unacceptable, and we're going to shield, you know, the ICC from your evil plans and all that. But I don't see it happening. I think, you know, I mean, I don't think they're going to go along with this. I don't think they're going to, you know, join the sanctions,
No.
though some of them might, you know, like the Hungarians, you know,
Yeah.
they're always very
Yeah.
quick to side with Trump. And what's very ominous about the executive order that Trump signed on this is that it says, I don't have it right in front of me, but it says something to the extent that we vehemently oppose, and we expect all our allies to
Yeah.
also oppose what the
Yeah.
ICC is doing, these illegitimate arrest warrants.
Yeah.
And this is just, like you say, it's like it's the Godfather.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
with the Riviera of the Middle East, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. I mean, it's the Godfather.
That's right. That's right.
That, you know, except that he's not, you know, as competent as Marlon Brando was. I mean, it's really crazy. But I fear we are seeing yet another nail in the coffin of the international legal order.
Yeah.
We are seeing yet another move towards a system where might makes right,
Yeah.
where, you know, rules, international law is for suckers, and, you know, rules are for thee and not for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's Trump's general attitude, and it's
Yeah.
been the attitude of you know, a certain portion of the American ruling class for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But now that they've completely gained power, it's very it's shocking to see. With the ICC, you know, with the sanctions against the ICC, they haven't gone so far yet as to say people will be arrested. But you know, who knows? That might be the next move. But what's very chilling about it is not just, you know, he's talking about sanctioning. Well, the executive order talks about sort of economic, you know, freezing of assets and not allowing people to travel to the United States. And that probably wouldn't directly affect the ICC too much. I mean, presumably there are people who own homes in the US or who have spouses or who are themselves US citizens, so it may affect them. It's kind of hard to see what's going to happen with that. But it also talks about these sanctions to be levied against people who cooperate. So who cooperate with the investigation. This is people like, for example, Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch is in New York. Amnesty International is based in London, but it has, you know, it has membership all throughout the United States, and it has offices in New York and DC and etc. So, you know, this is a very, very chilling thing that they're setting out to do, and it's along the lines of, you know, their clampdown. They're supposed, it seems what they're moving towards, a very severe clampdown, persecution of pro-Palestinian activism in the United States as well. So it is very, it's very frightening, and it's shocking. Maybe it's not surprising, but it's shocking.
Well, you are painting a picture as if Europeans are like a poodle as far as the US is concerned, meaning they are completely useless and weak when it comes to negotiating with the US. But at the same time, now they are also fighting on the economic front because Trump is imposing tariffs on European countries. They are going to have a trade war, which is going to hurt Europeans. They're going to suffer. So, are the Europeans public going to allow this bullying by the US on them? And their leaders may be poodles. I do not know why. You have to understand the political economy of the world in order to really explain that. But the trade war is a reality, and business class are going to suffer if Trump imposes tariffs on European countries. Also, NATO he's having a fight with the NATO partners, right, over the financial contributions. So that may also affect relationship between the US and the NATO partners in Europe. Do you think that the Europeans are just going to allow America to bully them like that in the coming years?
Well, unfortunately, I think they've done it before. I mean, in the first, I mean, this is kind of a long discussion, but I think certainly during the first Trump term, they were just sort of, hiding under their, most of the Europeans appeared to be just hiding under their desks and waiting for the storm to blow over. Now, now, of course, the situation is a little bit different because they thought the storm had blown over and Biden came by and this is the guy they could do business with. And yet Trump is back in an even more sort of ferocious way. So, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I do certainly hope that they grow a spine with regards to this. But those issues, I think, to the European ruling class, those issues that you just mentioned, the trade war and the prospect of the U.S. leaving NATO, which is it is a real possibility under Trump. The U.S. leaving the United Nations. This is a real possibility. And I think the European, the political elite are so frightened of this prospect that they may be willing to, sort of give way on other issues, which they look at as less fundamental to their national interests. And certainly Palestine is one of them. They were never really, like you said, Peter, I mean, a lot of the Europeans were never really sort of big proponents of Palestinian rights to begin with. So I don't think this is something that they're really going to pick a fight with Trump on. But, I certainly hope I can be proven wrong. There are European allies of Palestine, and I certainly hope that they're going to speak up and they're going to increase their number. But it's also, I think also it's worthy to point to the Hague the group of 7 that formed in the Hague the other week. Yeah. And a lot of the many other countries are getting together. They're sick of this. They're sick of this. They're sick of Israel as a rogue state, and they're sick of this this blind American protecting of Israel as a rogue state and protecting their crimes. And I think all of this is going to come to a head pretty soon. That's what I think.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to the US though. If you look at in the US now, I studied in the US many years ago. Nobody knew about what was happening in Palestine. They didn't even know that Palestine existed. But now, everybody, especially among the youth, not everybody, the majority are supporting Palestine. This is from my own amateurish analysis of US Israelis support for Israel in America is actually, in my opinion, is the weakest now among Americans. Last time, as I said, almost everybody didn't know about Palestine. They were supporting Israel. But now, you can see thousands and thousands in the campuses, among the faculty members, among the students, the general public. So, despite all this pessimistic outlook that you were discussing about with the genocide, the ceasefire, etc., and bullying of America to Europe policies, but in America itself, the support for Israel is going down like crazy now, and the support for Palestine is going up like crazy as well. So, yes. So that may have an implication for Trump's policy too. He can't ignore the ordinary American public's view of what's happening in Palestine. What do you think?
I'll just jump in quickly. In America, it's more complicated. In Australia, they can ignore the popular sentiment. I mean, I'm thinking of the Iraq War. In the Iraq War, whenever that was, the hundreds of thousands of people were out in the streets demonstrating. And the government then, under the Prime Minister, John Howard, they ignored the public and they just joined America in the war. So, and in America, my immediate thought is that maybe over the long term, but it took a long time during the Vietnam War for popular sentiment. It took decades before maybe in the end it did turn around the government's calculation. But it took a long time. And meanwhile, the American government destroyed South Vietnam. So I don't know to the extent to which the public in America are on the side of Palestine. As I said before, the young Jews are perhaps shifting. I think demographically there's a difference between the ages at which you find support for Palestine among the Jewish community. That's significant. In the general public, maybe Sol has some understanding of the demographics there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure support for Palestine is skyrocketing. It's going up like crazy. Sorry, like you say. And disgust at Israel is also skyrocketing. I mean, it has been the case. In particular, amongst young people, of course, the older you get in the demographics, the more support for Israel remains relatively solid. And of course, there's a very stark, party affiliation difference as well. So Republican voters still tend to side with Israel. It's more the voters for the Democrats that are very, very sort of supportive of Palestine now. But, for sure, what is definite is that the young generations are definitely moving towards stronger support for Palestine and disgust with Israel, or at least a lack of support for, the Israeli atrocities. I think part of that is actually the impact of social media, which has been just amazing. I mean, I'm not such a fan of social media in general. I mean, I don't really use it that much, but it really has been amazing. I mean, everybody has seen on their phones, these children being massacred and slaughters of civilians left and right, bombing of schools, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, everybody's seen them, and there's just no way that you can explain these away. And the Zionists in the United States see that. And that's precisely why they have been very, very strong on clamping down in the universities. They see the writing is on the wall. I mean, for sure, there is no question. The younger generation is abandoning Israel in droves. And so in particular in the universities, and this is the future political elite in the United States. These are, Harvard, Columbia, NYU. These are the people that are going to be in positions of power in about, 20 years or so. So that's why the Zionists are very, very afraid of that. That's why they have been trying to clamp down with extreme violence. And that's why they're going to try to, further this kind of persecution. Like you say, Peter, in the Vietnam era, it took decades for there to be a real sort of shift around. And, people can argue about whether there really was a fundamental shift around. But at least in terms of policy, it took decades. And of course, the US is now even, I would guess, of course, I was not alive at the time, but I would guess more polarized. The police is much, much more militarized in the United States than it ever has been. And of course, in the United States now, the people in power are complete fascists. And oligarchs are, are trying to fire anybody and everybody in the federal government that tries to, speak against it. I mean, it's a very dark picture right now. But it's it's always, what's that expression? It's always darkest before the dawn, or whatever it is. So it's inevitable. It is inevitable what's going to happen, and this kind of Zionist and oligarchist and sort of fascist resistance to that, all it's doing is postponing the inevitable. I mean, for sure, there is going to be a very dramatic turnaround, and when the United States, for all its faults as a country, when it changes, it can change very dramatically and very suddenly. This was actually a couple of months ago, but Omar Suleiman, the imam he's from New Orleans, but I think he's based in Texas now. He's an American Muslim religious leader. He's very inspiring. He has a lot of YouTube talk. Anyway, I saw him being interviewed once, and he's saying, look, in 10, all those politicians who were for the Iraq war, for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Now, 10 years, 15 years later, all of them were queuing up saying, no, I was always against that. Oh, no, I voted against that. Oh, no. That's what's going to happen. He's saying, 10 years, 15 years, whatever. All of these politicians are going to be lining up saying, no, I was always for Palestine. I was always against these Israeli atrocities. And he sounded very sort of optimistic, or at least he had a lot of hope with that. And I believe he's right. I mean, whether it will be 10 years, 15 years, maybe it'll be 5 years, maybe it'll be 2 years in the midterm elections. You never know. It could change very dramatically, but it is definitely going to change. The question is whether, well, I mean, we want it to happen now. We want it to happen yesterday. We don't want any more oppression of Palestinians. We don't want any more, executions and slaughters of Palestinians anymore. So that's why we have to keep up the movement and keep pushing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So very optimistic for ending with such an optimistic tone. The writing is on the wall. Eventually, all these politicians are going to regret supporting Zionism. It's just that we do not know when. The light is at the end of the tunnel. When we are going to arrive at the light, when the light is going to really shine over Palestine, only God knows. But we have to continue with our work. Atrocities are still happening. So all of us must continue our work. Thank you very much to both of you for enlightening us. Even though there are some pessimistic aspects, sorry, the discussion. But at the end, we also have the optimistic aspect as well. It's just that we do not know when eventually Palestine will be free, but it will be free, inshallah. Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, inshallah. Thank you again to both of you.
Okay,
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nazari. Thanks, Sol.
Okay,
Good to see
thanks. Good to see you. Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.